Hello y'all and welcome back. So today I'm going to be talking about the problem of free will versus determinism, easily one of the biggest philosophical problems and a topic in the philosophical subfield of metaphysics. So in the following unit we'll be discussing metaphysics and epistemology, two philosophical subfields: metaphysics, the study of what exists, and epistemology, the study of knowledge, how you know. And metaphysics and epistemology go hand in hand because every time you make a claim about what exists, you're also making a claim to know something, namely that that thing exists. So very difficult to make a metaphysical claim without making an epistemological claim, and vice versa. And in the field of metaphysics, perhaps one of the biggest issues or questions, I say, is that of free will versus determinism. Are our wills free, or are all events, including human action, ultimately determined by causes external to the will? This is the position known as determinism. Now, the way that you approach free will versus determinism is going to depend on your underlying metaphysics, specifically whether you're a theist or an atheist. If you are a believer in God, you have a version of the problem of free will versus determinism that you need to face that's very hard to solve. If you are an atheist, you have a version of the problem of free will versus determinism that you have to face that's very hard to solve. You don't get rid of the problem by embracing belief in God and just handing the problem over to God. You don't get rid of the problem by just getting rid of belief in God altogether. Either way, you have to face a very difficult version of the problem. And there's kind of two versions of the theistic problem that you need to face. One we're going to look at today has to do with God's knowledge. So this is the problem of human freedom and divine foreknowledge. And the problem goes like this: God knows everything. He's God. What you're going to do in the future, that's a thing, right? There's the first job you're going to take, who you're going to marry, when you're going to have kids, when you're going to retire, and so on and so forth. All these things that you do, those are things. So God knows those things. God knows your future. But we say that you only know something if it's fixed, if there's no two ways about it. So as I record this, I don't know the winner of the 2020 presidential election because it hasn't happened yet. It's not fixed. But I do know that I'm sitting here, that I'm breathing, that I have hands, that I'm talking. There's no two ways about those things. They're fixed, so I can claim to know them with certainty. The problem then is this: if God knows with certainty what you're going to do, there's no two ways about it. But then how are you free to do those things, right? How can you be said to do those things freely? Now, one solution comes to us from the early Christian thinker Boethius. Anicius Manlius Severinus Boethius, who's a scholar of Plato and Aristotle, a scholar of all the thinkers that we've looked at up to this point, and also a Christian, and he's employed by one of the barbarian chieftains that takes over Rome after the fall of Rome, Theodoric, who's an Ostrogothic king. That's all just kind of by the by. But Boethius says time is stretched out in a line like this. So here's the beginning of time, and here's the end of time, and absolutely everything that happens is on this timeline somewhere. And God, he says, is outside time, beyond time, without time. You can't say before time. That's important, because before and after only makes sense on this timeline here. But God's outside time, and God looks down on the timeline and sees everything, past, present, and future. So he sees what you're doing now, but he also sees what you're doing in the future. That's how he knows it. Now, here's how this doesn't compromise our free will. You're watching me do something right now. You're watching me just talking on this video. But nobody would say that because you're seeing me do it, you're observing me do it, you're somehow making me do it. I'm freely choosing to do it. Boethius says, just like you watching me, God watches you, except instead of seeing the present, God sees past, present, and future. So he sees what you're doing in the future. He just observes it. You still do it freely. So, Boethius' solution to the problem of a divine foreknowledge and human freedom is that God observes everything past, present, and future, and to observe someone doing something is not the same as to make them do it. Now, we need to say a little bit more about God's experience of reality here. God, says Boethius, is eternal. Now, often when we use the term eternal, we mean forever and ever and ever and ever without end. But strictly speaking, that's not correct. Forever and ever throughout all of time, the term for that is everlasting. So if you were to exist throughout all of time, you'd be everlasting. Now, God is everlasting, but God is more than that. God is also outside time, without time, beyond time. So God is eternal, meaning that he experiences all of space and time in a single perfect instant. So if you think of our experience of reality, it's like we can attend to one thing at one moment in time. That's like an adimensional point. Now, if you were somehow able to attend to many things at one moment in time, that would be like extending that adimensional point out into a one-dimensional line. If you could attend not to many things, but to all things at a single moment in time, that would be like extending that adimensional line out into a two-dimensional plane figure. And if you could attend not to all things at one moment in time, but to all things at all moments in time, extending throughout past and future along that timeline there, that would be like extending that two-dimensional figure out into a three-dimensional figure, say a cube or some other figure like that. And the way that God experiences reality, says Boethius, is like that, taking in the entire three-dimensional figure and all parts of it in a single perfect instant. So eternal means experiencing all of reality in a single perfect moment. That's how God takes in all of reality. God can observe what's going on, but to observe someone doing something is not the same as to make them do it. Now, this is a powerful solution. It's an elegant solution to the problem of freedom and divine foreknowledge, but it's not without its concerns. And one concern is the view of time it presupposes, and we'll talk about views of time in the next video. Thanks.